Welcome to the Stories Are Soul Food podcast, presented by Cannonball Books, the kids' fiction imprint of Canon Press.
Met a ghost of a king on the road when I first fell. Fire burning to my knees I fell. Met a ghost of a king on the road.
Well, welcome to Stories Are Soul Food podcast with I still run into people who don't know the acronym. It really surprises me. I thought everyone knew the acronym. Then I realized not everyone knows our podcast.
I dispute that. I think everybody knows our podcast.
Good. Anyways, first opening question is, if you were British, would your book have been called The Conker King instead of The Chestnut King?
No, it would not have been.
Nate always has a good answer for these types of questions. Yeah, no, I think that's an American misunderstanding that chestnut is not a word over in England. That's what they think.
Right. Well, they do call the actual big green spiky thing a conker.
Mm.
So that's not what the book The Chestnut King's about. So no, it would not be the Conker King.
Although they kind of have helmets. Didn't they use those as helmets?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there are conkers.
There's some conker shells around. But no.
Do you have any chestnut trees on your property? Are you going to get some?
I need to. I do not have any chestnut trees right now. I have a whole lot of alder and fir, ponderosa.
So you're staying pretty native right now.
I'm entirely native at the moment. So the only trees that are there are trees that were there so far, and one apple tree. Everything else I've planted has died. So
let that be a lesson to non-native plants.
Yeah. So I am. There's a bunch of trees I want to put in the ground, but I actually have to be pretty careful because the landscape in which we live is rich in soil, but high in wind.
Mm.
There's a lot of areas where they're out of the wind, a lot of draws and valleys and gullies, but they're also really damp. So,
so it's
like there's just, it's every
marshy.
single aspect. I've got a lot of land and every aspect of it is different. There's some very rocky soil. There's some very damp soil. There's clay. There's 13-foot thick topsoil, that's just a sponge, so I have willow. I have willow too. I've got some native willow. I love some of the native birch, and aspen is really cool.
Yeah. Partial to a birch tree, but they just get cleared out by those beetles. The beetles come through and
the death comes. the death comes.
The birch
for sure.
no longer exists.
The alder dies really fast also.
Okay.
It grows fast, dies fast. Yeah. And it's like every single year down by our creek is surrounded by alder. I'd have to clear it out of all the new fall, all the new
we have a couple of aspens.
Full trunks coming down.
The aspens are getting destroyed by the winter. They're just weak.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of trees I want to bring in. I have a friend who planted a California redwood up here that was not supposed to do well and just took off and is amazing and big now already.
And
because
those can live to be, talk about generational.
Yeah. So discovering that can happen, I need to kind of match the soil and find my spots. Like, where could I put redwoods? I also really love the eucalyptus in California.
Oh, okay.
I think it's pretty awesome. Also, not native to California.
Australian.
Yep. And just cool
only
trees.
Seen them at the zoo, I guess.
Just very, very cool trees. So, but we have plenty of native trees that are cool also, and I need to get a lot of them in the ground, hopefully this fall.
Okay, nice. Yeah, my uncle from Texas was telling us all about the big, his friend has a giraffe on his property. And I was thinking, I don't know that we can get giraffes up here, but we could certainly get some non-native plants in the soil.
Yeah. We might not be able to get a giraffe, but we can sure get a non-native plant.
That's
the theme of this episode. What are we talking about today, Brian?
Nothing too interesting except for basically I wanted to pick your brain on, this is a little bit obscure, but it's short film topic ideas versus short stories, and pick some questions on some short story ideas. And here specifically we had a young amateur filmmaker write in who's struggling. Actually, I don't know that they're young. I should just take that back. If you're listening, you might be old and struggling for good short film ideas.
This is actually reminding me of somebody I haven't sent an email to in a long time that I probably owe a response to.
We can just
continue. I'm going to send this email while you keep talking.
Well, perfect. Yeah. So the question is, this person writes in, I can only come up with feature-length story concept, but nothing that fits in a short. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess it's the opposite idea. Struggling. So they think they're coming up with feature-length story concepts, but nothing that fits in a short 10 to 15 page script. So do you have favorite short story / film? And then I think I had some short story ideas. I guess, what do you think about the genre? Are they the same?
Pretty similar. I mean, I think short stories can actually be feature films.
Okay.
The short fiction can adapt to a feature film pretty easily.
Yeah.
But it depends on the story. So Shawshank Redemption being an example.
Was that a short story first?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
Stephen
that.
King.
Oh, I did know that. All right.
Yeah. So I look at some Flannery O'Connor and I'm like, most of those are kind of short films because of the nature of her time frame, her timeline. But could you take Good Country People and make a feature around those characters? Yeah, 100% you could. It wouldn't be the short story. You'd be inspired by the characters in a short story. You'd be building it out. But the arc and architecture of a short story is not necessarily usually a full 3-act. And novels usually are more than, they're 3-act plus. And so neither of them quite perfectly become films. Most short stories, I would say, probably become short films better than full feature films.
God, doesn't it seem like the short story really relies upon that element of surprise? And that's why you get so many short stories that are about death.
I don't know. I mean, I haven't read a ton of short stories in a long time. So there's, I used to read them pretty regularly. And
I mean, it might be worth talking about Flannery. I just finished her Everything That Rises Must Converge collection. And I think, more than half are death or
Dark Grace.
Death related. Yeah.
Yep.
And it does seem to me that even secular folks writing short stories also default. Well, actually, to be honest, it's either sexuality or violence when I've been forced to read those short story collections.
Or thundering boredom.
Yeah. Yeah, just like musing
which is
about
just
psychology.
But it's also it's weird to say, but I think that there's a kind of like living death that they play with, just the life as death. They try that basic inversion of just
yellow wallpaper style.
Yeah, just the mundanity of it all. Just this is just the worst. It's so boring.
Yeah, I was
there is no hope. Nothing good could ever come.
I was forced to read a microfiction collection once, which is like the 75 to 300 word stories.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're universally bad. Not that it couldn't be done well, but everybody had to do either sudden violence or, sudden violence was pretty much it.
I mean, okay. So I love short stories. I do love them. I love to think of them. I rarely write them now because there's
not so much bang for
my
the buck.
time. Yeah. I would just say my time. If I was going to write something, if I'm working in fiction, it's on something I need to complete. It's on Silent Bells. It's on a script I have due or something like that. So I don't have any short fiction due to anybody. There's nobody's writing me checks to be like, hey, I need a short story.
I mean, isn't that universally true?
Yes.
They do not pay for short stories anymore.
I have a short story that is one of my favorite ever. And it needs a rewrite and I wanted to finish it. It's not in a final draft. And there's just no reason to finish it. There's just no reason to go back around.
Isn't that, I think I'm stealing from Walter Kern here, when he said, a genre's dead when it's only written by the people who write it or only read by the people who write it.
Yeah. I don't know if that's Walter, but it sounds like Walter.
Yeah. And so short stories are only written by people in MFA programs who are trying to write short stories.
Yeah. Nobody's out buying short story collections except for aspiring editors and writers.
That's sad.
And not all of us. But when a short story really hits, it's amazing.
That's true.
So it's kind of like a shot of whiskey or something. You have the ability to do something very small, concentrated, and potent, just powerful, as opposed to big, long, spread out potlucks of narrative.
Sure. Okay. So you think a short story that is that single taste or perhaps a chord. It just hits those two notes at the same time that work and you weren't expecting.
So have we really not talked about Flannery O'Connor on this podcast?
No. I think we've touched on her, but we've
That's
never
a
gone deep.
disgrace. It's disgraceful.
She's such in the fabric of everything that I think we talk about. We've mentioned her.
She really is. I mean, she's one of those like unsighted headwaters.
Right.
She's a genius. Her novels, not great.
Yeah.
Her short story,
just sprawling.
Short stories, phenomenal. Like really, she does acts of genius.
This
in her
is
short
a
fiction.
little personal anecdote. You recommended Flannery O'Connor when I was in elementary school or high school or something like that.
It's
I
like,
heard
jeepers, what was I thinking if you were in elementary school?
No, I just heard you recommending them. And then pursued them. Hated it, right? As a junior high kid. And was like, I don't like this taste. It might even have been later. I should have known better. I remember thinking later. But I've now returned to them. And they're just such an excellent
And suddenly
thing.
you like coffee because you're grown up.
You're grown up.
You're a grown up.
But
so the taste of coffee actually doesn't bother you at all.
It really was. I think it must have been high school. I shouldn't have said elementary. Makes you sound like you're recommending.
When Brian
stories
Cole's
about
in preschool, I made him sit down with a good man is hard to find.
He was like, I don't like this.
He was like, why is this happening?
But there are many adults who are in the same situation as me, who read Flannery and think, what the heck was that? Because 8 out of 12 stories end with a heart attack? Or
okay, but here's the thing.
Stroke or suicide.
Okay, so let's really dive in on Flannery O'Connor. Let's do it. If I'd known we were going to do the Flannery O'Connor episode, I would have done a full-on survey of my favorite works of her short fiction to prepare. But instead, this is going to be a purely off the cuff. We're just running into each other on the street talking about Flannery O'Connor podcast, which is, after all of our podcasts. We don't want to insult our listeners with preparation. So Flannery O'Connor, I had read a little bit and just kind of little pieces. And some of this is autobiographical here, but I've known, and people have heard me talk about this before, so forgive me if it's redundant, but I knew from 6th grade on that I wanted to write. I was going to be a writer. Like many males before me, I made no effort whatsoever to make that come to pass. I just existed. And I knew that I wanted to be a writer. And I read, I read the stuff I loved, but I didn't try to write. I tried once in 8th grade. My grandfather told me it sucked. It was terrible. It was. But I still remember specific phrases and descriptions from this piece of short fiction I wrote in 8th grade that I was particularly pleased by, none of which are good. High school, I ended up having to start writing some short pieces. Didn't attempt anything like a novel. It was all creative nonfiction, these scenes, snapshots, montages, just real little pieces of things that I'd glimpsed. Some of which I constructed into bigger things, bigger meaning a couple thousand words. Some of which were just 800 words, 1,000 words, small vignettes, tons and tons of vignettes trying to capture the real, trying to capture characters and all this kind of stuff. I read my first Flannery O'Connor somewhere in there and was not particularly affected. It was kind of like, okay. I wonder why people talk so much about her. In college, I read a little bit more because Doug Jones, back then, one of my teachers and was an editor at Canon, was hugely influential in my life and like in pushing a certain kind of voice, a certain kind of style, and really trying to write concrete, visceral prose. And he pushed me towards some O'Connor, which I read, and again was sort of like, oh, that was funny. And I was male and adolescent enough to enjoy the shock of it.
Yeah.
It was like, ha, ha, ha. That's so funny.
Right.
In grad school at St. John's in Maryland, I ended up taking a course, one class that was entirely Flannery O'Connor, and just did just a deep dive with Professor Townsend at St. John's in Annapolis. And it was phenomenal. Like it was a really incredible incredible class, probably one of the most potent classes of my graduate school career. And processing these stories, like reading one short story and coming to a 2-hour seminar where we're like really exploring what's going on.
So that can be either really good or really bad.
It's going to go well. It's going to go really terribly. And it went really, really well. He was a phenomenal professor. I remember one of my classmates lashing out and said, why do we have to keep talking about the Bible and the Apostle Paul and Christianity? Like, it'd be just as easy for us to be reading all of these short stories through the lens of Hinduism or something like that. And this Professor Townsend, turned to her and said, well, I do apologize if you're not familiar with the source material and you can't keep up. But O'Connor was a Christian. She was writing from a Christian perspective, and her short fiction is laced, especially with huge influence from the Old Testament, and just moved on. So feel free to try to get up to speed on your own time. Is basically what he said, which was amazing. Reading her short fiction for me was a big exploration of the nature of framing a story, how to frame a story. Where does the story exist? So my sister on the phone today told me a story, and she told me a story about she and her husband are up in the mountains in California at a family camp. My brother-in-law is not. He's one of those guys who goes into a deep sleep. You're not going to hear him yelling in the night. I've got some sleep talkers in my family. He's not one of those. In the middle of the night, he yelled, he shrieked, apparently, and flailed and hit my sister, and she woke up, and everybody then faded and went back to sleep. And my sister was like, oh, that was kind of embarrassing. Other people were sleeping in this adjacent room in this cabin, and thought it was funny. Then the next day, they wake up and they'd just been in Zambia, and he tells her, it's like, man, I had the most vivid dream I've had in a really long time of that monkey that we saw in Zambia trying to come through our window down onto the bed. It was like this monkey was crawling in the window down onto the bed. Okay. Weird dream story. They get up, they get ready, they head out, and they walk into all this disarray next door where a bear has broken into the cabin adjacent to them and eaten all the snacks. They for this family camp, or many of the snacks. It's a bear, so probably all. But my sister said they were kind of struck that this had happened, that he'd had this vivid dream, and they went back to their cabin, and they had opened the window directly above their bed before they went to sleep. And sure enough, the screen had been just pulled aside. So most likely there was a bear climbing through this window onto my sister's bed, and my brother-in-law
knew what to do with the bear.
Dreams it, screams that there's a monkey coming on them and like flails, and the bear left.
It's like, whoa.
Okay, so that's a story, right?
Yeah.
There's a story. What's the story? The story is the setting. What's the finale? What's the final flavor? Is it the discovery that actually there had been a bear climbing onto their bed, and then my brother-in-law had yelled and flailed, and the bear had gone next door to eat all the snacks? Had it eaten the snacks before? Had it how do you arrange this? And how do I open? Where do I open? What's a theme? Where do I close? And then if I'm writing fiction, what am I doing with the characters? Am I just telling you a scene, or am I actually going to dive in and create two people and they have a little bit of weird friction? And I find some ironies in the nature of men and women and his need to protect, and do I play with themes of protection and abdication? What do I do? How do I take this incident and then lace it with themes and truths about reality, and then try to structure it, create the frame? And where does it end? Where does it start? What O'Connor did for me was maybe realize that if I were going to jump into the New Testament and try to tell a Flannery O'Connor story, it would be about the Apostle Paul. And it would actually be about the Apostle Paul. There's a few different places where it would be about the Apostle Paul. But a big O'Connor frame would be on his conversion. And the fact that he is this wound tight Pharisee, so convinced of his own righteousness that he'll commit murder over his own out of his own righteousness, and does commit a murder actually is involved in betraying this righteous man and getting a lynch mob to lynch him. So in an O'Connor story, imagine, this self-righteous white Southerner, getting a lynch mob to lynch this black pastor, who is shining like Stephen while they murder him.
Mm-hmm.
And then as he's riding away, because there's somebody else he wants to murder, he is struck. He's knocked off his donkey and ends up blind on his back in the road. That's an O'Connor frame.
Yeah.
The O'Connor frame ends at this moment of just violent conversion, violent grace.
The dark grace.
The dark grace. And so if you framed this Apostle Paul story at him blind and senseless in the road, and then trying to stand up and not being able to see, that's where she stops. She tells these vignettes and she grabs that.
Yeah.
The shipwreck would be another one, being bit by the snake. There's the different pieces that she would frame these things differently. And I think it's really powerful. It's really potent when she does that. And it's that strong flavor. You're pulling out really dark chocolate. It's a really, really potent flavor. You read the short story, and what is she saying when the Bible salesman steals the prosthetic limb from Holga?
Right.
Why was Holga's previous name Joy and she changed it to Holga? And there's all this stuff to unpack. And she always inserts this violent grace, a dark grace, a heavy grace into the situation. And so,
when I was reading Everything That Rises, all that must converge. It's a story about they all involve classes in some way, all the classes in the South and the hierarchies of the exact white Pharisee character you're talking about is in Revelation, I think, where that she's sitting in the doctor's office and looking at all the people and hating them all as she waits, except for this one woman. But then this one woman's daughter ends up just insulting her and attacking her, goes crazy and tries to kill her. And that moment is basically a revelation moment for this woman as she has a vision of
everybody going to heaven,
everyone going to heaven ahead of her.
Yep.
And her whole vision has been, God, I am the best that I could be. And if you were to make me, I would rather be made black before I'd be made white trash. And then she gets attacked by white trash, and that's kind of the moment in her story.
Yep. And she's constantly sorting everybody into would you rather framework.
And then the Flannery O'Connor story really revolves around the displacement. When you have that initial displacement, that something happens that it shouldn't have happened in a normal world, or perhaps that wouldn't. Yeah. And then as that resolves, sometimes it takes violence to resolve. And then other times it's a mental shift that resolves.
But and so for a lot of characters, for almost all characters, it takes moments of extreme drama and emotional hardship, if not physical hardship.
Yeah.
For them to get put on the right path. Yeah. So I think about sort of some sweet character who everybody loves, and she thinks her biggest struggle is her own little insecurities of not feeling, strong enough or powerful enough or good enough. She doesn't feel sufficient, but she also feels like she's pretty sufficient.
Yeah.
It's a little bubblegum. But everybody loves her. And then she has a moment of, like she rear ends somebody at a stop sign. You tell that story in this moment of humiliation, and you find out that no, it's 100% your fault. It was all your fault. All of it was your fault. There was no one else to blame here but you. There are no excuses. There's nothing you can grasp at. And everything else that's an excuse, you can blame this, you can blame that, you can blame the other thing. All these things that you've used to bounce through life unscathed and just be exactly who you want to be for yourself. Mm-hmm. Just all come tumbling down in this one moment of humiliation.
And you get scathed.
And then the transformation that happens when people encounter their last ditch, when people are embarrassed, when people do experience shame, when they do experience hardship, when they hit something hard enough that they can't just resolve to get through it.
Yeah.
Merely resolving to get through it, won't get you anywhere. And It's really interesting because if you talk to people who are great characters, really great characters, and they know what they're doing, they're living well.
Do you mean great meaning virtuous, or
I mean,
great
like,
as in interesting?
in both.
Okay.
I mean, like, they're just great characters. So this is a person it's easy to admire and respect, but they are not absent of quirk. I'm not talking about vanilla characters. I'm talking about a character you meet where it's like, man, this is a salty character, but actually really admirable. I can really respect and admire this person. It's easy to see this particular grandmother, who's a real piece of work in many hilarious ways, as just a phenomenal influence of grace in the generations behind her in their lives. If you find these characters who are in their 70s, a little older, a little younger, and you dive in, you try to dive into their lives and find those moments of massive transformation when they were put on the track that has led them to this place. So you can backtrack it. You're here, you're this guy. When did you become this guy? And you start backing it up, and you back it up and back it up. You're going to find some pretty intense moments of shame, humiliation, tragedy, of the complete failure of self-reliance. You're gonna find these places where people encountered the divine and were just smacked down. Just got smacked in one way or the other. And it could be, via alcohol. It could be the loss of a family member. It could be the destruction of a first marriage. Just some
something got rattled big time.
Yeah.
And you couldn't just sail on through.
Yep. And it's, you can't just continue being like something big enough that.
That's what you mean by dark grace. It's that moment where you
transformation. It's transformative.
Have to resolve this broken bone. Like there's something.
There's no just going forward, without any kind of thought.
Okay, so one of a favorite.
And that's what she does in her short fiction. Like it always ends with that moment, and then she cuts and leaves.
Yeah.
And so that's that moment. I think the best characters we have in our lives all have that moment. They all do.
So with Parker's Back, that classic one. Do you remember that one? It's about he's the sailor who has tattoos all over.
Okay.
And marries an ugly woman because he won't sleep with her, or she won't sleep with him. And so he's like, "You're the one I'm going to marry." But she hates him and doesn't like his tattoos. So he goes and gets a huge tattoo of Christ on his back that he can't even see. It's why it's called Parker's Back. And then comes home because she's a Christian. He knows that he's like, "This time I got you because I got Jesus on my back." But he gets messed up by that tattoo, on the way home. And he comes home thinking he's going to just, he's like, "I've been changed." And he shows her, and she's like completely unimpressed, and then says, "That's not Jesus," and beats him up with a broom. And that's the the end of Parker's Back. But that one's interesting to me because it's from the other perspective, like that moment of it has multiple. You think this is the dark grace, like, oh, he's about to be converted because he got a Jesus tattoo, like a very Byzantine, sad.
And instead he gets a beating.
Yeah.
And the answer is both are true. Yes.
And,
both are true.
I love it too because the tattoo artist is like, "You sure you want this one? This is a weird one. Like you don't want this big Byzantine Christ on your back." And that moment of using that lens to tell she tells a conversion story like nobody else, because anybody else heading into some sort of sailor with tattoos who's married to a Christian, you can almost see that being set up to be a very boring story.
Yep.
Although some of those happen, and the boring one happens, but this one, you just kind of end up being displaced yourself. You finish the story not quite sure how to feel about anything.
It's like, wait, it's like, what happened? And she loves ending before she's answered that question.
Yeah.
So she's not trying to tie it in a bow. She's ending at the incident. It's like she's ending at an inciting incident for another narrative.
Yeah.
There's this inciting incident that would provoke, more. So again, Apostle Paul gets knocked off his donkey. We all know that's an inciting incident that takes him.
Yeah.
Takes him into who he becomes. But it's also the final scene of the Stephen narrative.
Okay.
So if you frame the murder of Stephen, Paul knocked off his donkey is part of that story. And I think it's what happens on the last page of that story if you're framing it that way. So what she does, like in that incident, she's not telling you, but what happens to them for the rest of their lives? And it's like, well, I'm not telling you, but this is the moment. This is that moment that actually, like does a little track switch. Like you've thrown the lever, the tracks have changed, things are going in a different direction now. So transformative, frequently violent, like unpleasant grace.
Yeah.
Dark grace has been brought in. So when the woman named Joy changes her name to Holga and stomps around on her prosthetic leg and could walk more quietly, but doesn't, is like intentionally thumping around to sadden her mother, and she wants to study philosophy. And then a simple Bible salesman comes to the house to sell Bibles, and she thinks, really, this is one of the beauties of O'Connor, is like people's delusion about themselves.
Yeah.
She thinks that she's going to seduce and destroy him.
This Bible salesman.
Yeah. This innocent rube. And there's all this classism. She is intelligent. She is sophisticated. She is going to destroy his soul. She's going to seduce him and devour him and destroy him because he's this, ridiculous guy. In the end, they get up in a hayloft, which is a funny place to take a woman with a prosthetic leg. They get up in the hayloft. He takes off her prosthetic leg, steals it, and leaves her. Has no interest in her whatsoever. That the desire to seduce and destroy has been going both directions. He steals her leg, leaves her in the hayloft.
Yeah.
Says, I got a girl's glass eye this way once, and leaves.
Doesn't he say, she says, talks to him about being a nihilist. And then at the end he says, I've been a nihilist forever or something like that. I can't remember the dialogue because that's the other
I've been a nihilist my whole life or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. And so that is it's like you could rename that the salvation of Holga, where she's just been made a fool of and thrown away, and she's humiliated and stuck in a hayloft as he steals her leg and leaves. The Bible salesman turns out was an absolute scoundrel.
But Flannery pursues those characters ruthlessly. Like that's what she loved, is just looking around, that Southern Catholic South and just capturing all these people in a row.
Yep.
I love she has a ton of failed students coming back home, which in some sense, I think she probably felt like she was, because she got sick and couldn't finish her education. But the Artificial Chill's another one where this guy comes home convinced he's going to die, and his mom's going to find his tortured artist manifesto. And so he's convinced he's going to die, but there's a crack on the ceiling that ends up basically being like the Holy Ghost that comes down and like converts him when he can't get away because he's sick.
Yeah.
And that sort of moment where he's like, thought he was going to die. Turns out he has some tiny sickness that he got because he was trying to get his mom's servants to disobey. I don't know. Very good stuff. It's just all of them are like a well woven. Every piece comes together and delivers.
Yeah, and a lot of people slot her in sort of a Southern Gothic place, or that she writes these like human horror stories.
Yeah,
like it's really not. She really doesn't. And it's not to say she doesn't ever get there. She does, and especially in the novel length stuff, she does more so. But she and I would disagree about the gospel. She and I would disagree about long-term sanctification. Yeah, if we had theological conversations, naturally she's Catholic and I'm Protestant. But when she gets to that moment of startling grace, that moment of rebuke, that smack that just wakes a character up, I think she gets to it in such an unexpected and inevitably human way over and over and over again.
Right.
And all of this, we got here because we were talking about short fiction and feature films. Most of them would never work as a feature film. They're not that kind of short story.
Just meaning because it's not elevating, it's not trying to bring a character from here to there over.
There's not a 3-act structure over long term. I'm scrolling through her short fiction in my head. There might be some that should and could be.
Why did you say a good man is hard to find would maybe be able to do it? Or I guess if we're talking about that one's familiar to a lot of people. Yeah. That story of family on a road trip, pulled off the road, their car stolen. Yeah, grouchy grandma.
The reason why you could, I'm think in terms of art house indie films.
Yeah.
If you're going to make very small focus features,
Yeah.
but even then you would be you'd be grabbing characters and worlds and expanding way beyond what the short story does.
So the
Charles Portis is another one who's written short stuff that becomes.
You're just saying a road trip where you get shot at the end is not a feature film.
Normally.
Yeah. So if you're gonna make it
Could
a feature
it be
film,
a feature film? Could it be a good feature film? Yes.
But you got to just really do. You have to have stuff
yeah.
happen along the.
Yeah,
road
it would need to be, and you need more prior to it. You need more setup. You need, there's a lot more necessary. But it's such a famous one because of the finale, the payoff of the finale.
Yeah.
But also, it's also interesting because she doesn't tend to do really heightened situations. She likes using a girl, a failed student who's back home and has lost her leg and made her name ugly because she feels ugly. She's not Joy anymore. She's Holga. And of course, Flannery relates with that character. She relates to that character.
Mm-hmm.
When you're dealing with Good Man's Hard to Find, you have an outlaw.
Yeah, the misfit.
You've got a murdering outlaw. You've got a more heightened situation.
Much more dramatic than you feel.
So in terms of like, okay, so if you take him and you take her, the grandmother, and you take the world and you're going to put them together, could that be a Coen Brothers movie? And the answer is, yeah, it could.
Mm.
But it would be significantly expanded and explored in different ways. And you'd have to take a position on things in the story that O'Connor does not, but that she intentionally does not.
Yeah. So the relationship of the grandmother's the protagonist of that story. She's the one that needs the moment of grace.
Yep.
And then you've got her son and her daughter, and then the grandkids as well, or her son and her daughter-in-law, and then the grandkids. Do you think it would be the situation where we need to know what they're doing and where they're going? I'm just really making you flesh this out into a feature film right now.
But part of it is that one, especially, there's a lot of arguments about the ending.
Yeah.
And, when she finally breaks and she sees him as her child.
Yeah. The misfit.
Yeah. And this outlaw. And the question is he actually?
Right.
Is this her son that she threw away from a long time ago? Does this woman actually end up murdered by her own child whom she discarded? Or is he just a type? Is she entering into some form of sainthood and reaching out to him as a child?
Because I guess the murder does feel kind of arbitrary in that sense, unless he's just stealing a car, a carjacking. So, so you're saying you could supply some meaning to that.
So if you were like, oh, I've got with an outlaw, a self-righteous old woman who's having to live with her family, a road trip, and the whole thing catastrophically goes bad until the grandmother ends up executed by this outlaw. Why do they have a connection? Why does this matter? How's it coming? If you're going to actually develop it, you go that direction.
Yeah.
They have an actual familial connection.
Right.
It's a
Part
matricide.
of the reason she's such a Pharisee is because she.
Yeah, it's because she actually has a past that she's ignoring, and that you can make a movie. Like you could make that into a movie, but it's definitely a focus features. It's definitely a little art house thing.
Yeah,
A24 would do it. And you're taking it to festivals. You're not trying to make. You're not trying to make something that's a big, broadly helpful film.
That one feels a lot more like you're taking a Hemingway take on it, where he has that lie of his that he says that all of his stories have 80% under the surface. They're all icebergs, where there's always a hidden detail that could have changed the whole thing. I don't believe that. There's a few of them that do.
No, he gets to say that. No, it's always everything I do is mysterious and wonderful.
Right. And he's always able to come in afterwards and say, oh yeah, at the end of that story, the main character went and shot himself, and you can always say well,
no, he didn't. Because you didn't write that.
That wasn't set up. You can come back later and say that.
I mean, you can come back later and do that, Ernest. But
right. Yeah.
But it's not there.
It is interesting to compare those because another short story that ends with similar violence that I like is Hemingway's Short Happy Life of Francis Maycomer, which is an incredible drama piece. But again, I don't remember the last time I read that. It's probably been 25 years. That one just, I think, is a pretty fun character. It's Hemingway's classic must-tell story of the young man whose wife hates him, and they go off to have the old noble hunter take them on a hunting trip, and then ends up with his wife Well,
Yeah.
you should read it. You should read it.
Well,
audience. But that story right there, and then the surprise ending on top of all that makes it.
Why do you think short fiction has died? Is it TV and film?
I think, yeah, we don't have a place where we consume it.
So we have the ability to consume narrative that takes 22 minutes, 44 minutes, or 80 minutes to 2 hours, or in the case of Dune, 2.5. Like we have
far too long.
Yeah, we have slotted. We've used up our space for short narrative consumption.
Yep.
Like it's
and you gave the best possible interpretation. The worst is that we're flicking through reels for the
yeah. We're on the doom scroll.
Yeah. The short story has been replaced by this motion. So.
And if only you learned to post like 37 reels that all built on each other.
Now that,
and it's like the new
at the end, it ends
the new
with
short
death.
fiction. The new short fiction is a doom scroll. Where people are just scrolling and scrolling. But yeah, that actually probably is the case, you know, and because I, in talking to people in Hollywood and executives there, one of the things they're trying to solve for is the doom scroll. Like, how do we get people back into long form consumption? Meaning, how do we get them to watch half an hour of television? Because it's not easy.
Yeah.
In the adolescent demographics.
Well, okay.
The fact that that's too much commitment. It's
Stafford,
a little striking.
Rams QB, right? Stafford just got in the news because he was saying he can't connect with his young teams because after practice, everybody's on their phone.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of when I read short stories and it was Credenda or, occasionally Harper's, or I'd find, that's where I read short stories. And they're gone. Like those are all dead.
Things are dead. And if only they were still here, then NFL players would be reading them after practice and not doom scrolling.
that little segue didn't connect, but it was interesting to me.
But it is. Well, I may have. I don't know if I mentioned this or not. My son was on a travel team, a basketball travel team, this summer. It's something I did when I was 16, and totally different program. But he was on this travel team. And, I was familiar with what he was going to be faced with, right? So he's going to be off with a bunch of guys his age, traveling around the West in these basketball tournaments. And I knew exactly what he was going to be up against. So we talked a lot about like preparing for it and being ready and, just.
You mean like shenanigans or disobedience?
Yeah, but just in terms of how to carry himself, how to relate to guys, but also how to, be an influence for good and not for evil.
Right. Oh yeah. If
just
sinners,
the basics.
If sinners entice thee.
So if you're on a basketball team and you're away from your parents and so is everybody else.
Yeah.
So a bunch of 16-year-olds, and these were 16-year-olds. Among other places in Vegas.
Oh, wow.
So like we're going to the worst place. It was amazing because the first time I checked in with them, I was like, so, how's it gone? How's it gone so far? Tell me about your teammates. What's going on? Who's causing problems? Like who's the ringleader, in terms of guys sneaking out, all that. Because the idea that there would not be one, that guys would not be sneaking out, did not even occur to me. It did not occur to me that it would be possible to take a bunch of athletic, aggressive teenage boys, around the West and not have that happen. He told me, he's like, they're all just on their phones.
Oof.
That's it. They're just, everybody's in their rooms, on their beds, scrolling.
Yikes.
Every day.
So there's no ringleader.
And he was the ringleader. They were gone for the 4th of July. He was like, we got to get fireworks. We got to go. He was out finding barbecue by himself. It was like just trying to, and it was a good experience for him in the end, but it was really striking when they were in Vegas. The NBA Summer League was there. And so he spent a lot of time in their downtime watching NBA games, and guys would come for that. But he's like, even then, like guys would stay back, aspiring young basketball players like passing on an opportunity to
watch NBA players.
From up close, just scrolling on their hotel room beds. And it's bizarre the sedative we've plugged into adolescence has been pretty incredible. So it's really quite strikingly strange. And a friend of mine is a coach, does a bunch of travel baseball, and he took a big team to an away tournament and did the same thing. He was all, because he remembers, back in the day, and he was all ready to like be heavily Mr. Chaperone, lock it down. And the same thing. He's like, everybody didn't have a single incident because everybody was on their phones the whole time. And then it'd be, hey, it's time to go. And you could get them, put it down, and we all go. But as soon as you have downtime, when there's actually going to be a problem, they're all just on the IV drip of the sedative. And it's really weird because it's not like I'm yearning for the days when teenage boys were
break out in
jumping
Vegas
out of windows in Vegas and, off getting into all sorts of trouble. But that is the fruit of testosterone. It does, but it's like a necessary downside of what happens when you have a large population of men that you're raising. Some of them will be very badly behaved. And if they're men and they have testosterone levels, they're going to be badly behaved in certain ways. And it's not good. But this is just a sign that it's so heavily numbed right now that it's going to be wild.
You're just saying we aren't correcting for that right now.
So the next time your kid's doom scrolling, get out some Flannery O'Connor and read them a short story that will melt their face. And they'll be like, Mom,
why did you read that?
And don't skip any of the words. Don't skip any of the hard stuff.
Yeah.
And just let's go through this story together.
Yeah.
And read to them aloud and be ready to answer some questions and shock and awe.
It does seem like it's important though to start with some short stories. Like obvious O. Henry's a basic one. A very friendly No, O. Henry's great. O. Henry's great. Ransom of Red Chief. The first time you read that one.
It's not that he's not great, but there's still a heavy sigh for me with O. Henry.
You've just heard The Gift of the Magi too many times. And that's why I didn't start with The Gift of the Magi.
Way too many times. But O. Henry is the gimmick guy. Like, hey, let's have the gimmick. But yeah, I mean, the fact is that the most important thing, this goes for everything. The most important thing you do with your kids is not let them doom scroll. I mean, just make them exist in the real world, but then provide them with lots of good and interesting fiction, some of which is shocking. I remember there were some moments, and I've done this with my own kids, where they're kind of like, they're a little restless and trying to read stuff and finding a book. And when you hand a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old some Raymond Chandler or some P.D. James, it's a little shocking. You hand him Flannery O'Connor, there's like, whoa, am I allowed to read this? Is this
the sci-fi world's great for that? That's what Arthur C. Clarke, get your kids on some of those scary sci-fi that is actually giving them tools for understanding how technology works. Those ones are great.
And but handing them a little more protein, a little more grist, and some of those coffee flavors as they age. Handing them some of the things that it's going to provoke them to grow. It's going to provoke them to engage.
Yeah.
But do whatever you can to not have their world and their narrative sense just curated by reels, by TikTok videos and reels, which is just tragic.
I remember reading about Ray Bradbury. I think he wrote 52 short stories a year, every year, for his entire adult life. Like he just. And I should just do that from now on. I mean, you could.
This seems easily resolved.
It feels like it kind of ruined most of his longer prose, though, because it's like eating frosting. It's just like he's spent so long on.
Okay, never mind. I guess I won't. I guess I won't do that. One a week forever is a bit much.
Doesn't that seem like a lot?
Yeah,
it's certainly really disciplined, but I mean, he's got some real good ones there.
That's crazy times.
Yeah.
So short fiction, there are things I still love about it, and it's unique. Some of my favorite stuff I've ever written is in short fiction. And some of the stuff I want to write more than anything else, just for personal pleasure, is in short fiction. But there's not.
It's not there.
There's not a thing for it.
Yep. I was reminded of that because the only time Anthony Doerr could get his short fiction published is after he'd had a massive runaway bestseller.
Pulitzer Prize winning.
Pulitzer Prize winner. They're like, fine, we'll publish your short fiction. And
Fine.
and that was funny to me.
Yeah. Are you going to be publishing any anthologies of short fiction here, Brian?
Well, I think, we're already working on poetry. So I think we're already in another dead genre. So
we are in the graveyard already. So we may as well
dig up
keep
a different grave.
robbing graves. Yeah, that sounds like a great business plan.
Yep. So the answer is no. You're going to have to find Nate's short fiction.
There's one that I need to rewrite.
I think you've mentioned that one before.
Yeah, and it's someday.
Yeah.
Someday it's gonna happen.
I think the Rise and Fall of...
Oh, Rise and Fall of Circumcision.
Is that not the one?
No.
Oh,
there's one called Gay Dog.
Okay. I haven't found that one.
So Conversations with Todd, I wrote and published in a literary anthology, and I liked it a lot. And it was my hat tip to O'Connor.
Okay.
And just the pettiness, the weirdness of how you insert violence, the use of random violence or apparently random violence, but it's providential violence in conversion. That's the Conversations with Todd. And then the Rise and Fall of Circumcision was one that I typed on a cocktail napkin for Esquire magazine. And I had book offers. I had publishing deals after that one, which was kind of funny.
So they didn't understand that it could not become a novel.
Yeah. Yeah, it was funny. And then Gay Dog is one that's never been published. And it's in the vein of Conversations with Todd. And it just makes me smile. It makes me laugh. And the
title made me laugh.
It makes my wife do the opposite.
Yeah, she's like, please don't publish that.
Yeah, it's about an amateur taxidermist.
Hello, I'm querying my short story.
Yeah, Gay Dog.
Gay Dog.
Yeah. It's also an O'Connor structure. It's a dark gray story about an amateur taxidermist with a porn problem.
Well, I'm glad I dug this a little bit further into
the spoiler. It's never been published, but it ends when he shoots his own toes off with a shotgun.
Wow.
When he's in the backyard, he's going to try to execute the family dog, and he slips in some dog mess and blasts his toes off. So yeah, it's never been published. And my wife was like, "Please don't do this, please."
Oh well,
I'm like, this is coffee flavor with extra coffee,
soon to be on Canon Plus in audio
and extra flavor. Yeah.
So we've recommended Flannery if you want to add a little extra coffee to your life. What's some other ones? Borges, I guess. Would be a fun one.
Borges is a little weirder, but worth reading. Yep. He's very worth reading. I think O'Connor is more required.
Yeah.
I think it's required for people who want to have a palate. So if you
sure.
If somebody said, "Hey, I really want to understand Scotch, not as just a drinker, but as a connoisseur, and I want to understand, the Highland whiskeys and the Speyside whiskeys and the stuff up in the Orkneys, and I want to understand Islay." And you get them to Islay, and they're like, "I just don't like peat smoke. I don't like those smoky scotches." I'm like, that's fine. Like, you don't have to. But if you want to actually understand story, narrative, if you really want to get it, if you want to have a broad palate and understand what the different flavors are, then you need to be able to, sip an Islay, a really smoky Ardbeg and understand what's going on in it. And that's kind of where I stick Flannery O'Connor. You don't have to love it. You don't have to always go back to it. But if your goal is to understand story and the power of story with more breadth, then O'Connor short fiction is a really important flavor profile to understand and comprehend.
Sure. And also the fact that she knew so clearly what she was doing, like Mystery and Manners, that essay collection explains it all. So if you're one of those people who are like, I just don't get it, she's got essays.
No, she understands exactly what she's doing with Dark Grace.
And can explain how that connects to aesthetics in the Christian life and why it matters. And yeah, sure, she's way off on transubstantiation. But,
but so what?
So what? So is
Luther.
Yeah, so is everybody.
But and I would say there's one of my favorite terrible movies is Magnolia. And I say terrible movie because it's as far as I know, not filterable and is not something, it's just not out there for general consumption. You don't need to go watch this movie. You know, it's not that. But this, you know, that movie uses a plague of frogs in Beverly Hills, like truly beautifully. Like just really amazingly.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing that O'Connor could do and very few other storytellers could do.
Well, it reminds me, because when my son is writing stories for school, like a fourth grader, right?
Yeah.
People die in blenders. That's the level of, you know, violence. But Flannery is able to have a woman gored to death by a bull and have it work.
Yep.
And the blender didn't work. I had my son take it out.
You're like, son, you're embarrassing me. I'm going to mention this on a podcast. Yeah, it is. So I think that I would never say that people have to read Flannery O'Connor, but anybody who has an aspiration to understand story at a deeper level and to broaden their experience and the taste palette for the taste palette's a great phrase now. Their ability to discern what's going on and why and how, and to anticipate and read thematic exploration and thematic driven plot ultimately.
Yeah. I think bouncing her off of Ernest Hemingway is really useful. Like you can just watch secular versus Christian.
Yeah. So there's dark grace versus just dark.
Yeah.
Like violent darkness versus dark grace.
And you're watching a man try to present a heroic code to combat the darkness of the world.
Yep.
Versus a woman who understands the world's built on a heroic code.
Yeah.
That defeats the darkness. I mean,
the points of contrast are really, really strong.
I think it's great stuff.
So she's one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah.
And if I were to like list my influences, it would be Woodhouse for his playfulness and his joy, and then Lewis and Tolkien, obviously, for all the obvious reasons, and then O'Connor.
Yeah.
So Flannery O'Connor, P.G. Woodhouse.
I need to go to her long fiction.
And then the
now.
Inklings.
I think I've done all her short stories. I need to go to the long fiction. I gave up the last time I tried. It got so weird.
It's not weird. It's not good. Her long fiction isn't great.
Well,
scenes are amazing. There are scenes and sequences that are truly amazing, but the novels, she doesn't have the payoff. She can't build the cathedral. She can do the small, powerful thing. And I think that's great. That's her highest and best use. But it is funny to me that she is a top 4 influence for me, for sure.
Yeah. Well, there we go. That's a wrap.
Alrighty. See us.
If you're a SAS listener who often makes it to the end of these videos and the end of our podcast, when I start talking, you'll know that I'm often bringing up Canon Plus. So I'm going to let you in a couple seconds watch a video that explains why Canon Plus is the premier Christian streaming service for entertainment, education, and theology. Give it a watch, and then please come join us on Canon Plus if you haven't already.
Does your streaming content make you a better wife and mother? A better husband and father? Or, when you sit down and pick up the remote, does the content you consume attack you?
You fat bastard.
Is it at war with everything you say you stand for? Does it make you stronger? Does it make your family stronger? How much darkness streams directly into your home every week? How much do you pay for the privilege of consuming whatever new dark thing Hollywood algorithms have assigned to you and to your family?
Just my 2 dads and me.
It doesn't have to be that way. Canon Plus is building a global platform with one simple goal: to create and deliver great content that will help Christian families grow stronger. Content to encourage, equip, challenge, and inspire. Yes, these times are bleak, but the darkness cannot win for long. Light is far more powerful. With thousands of audiobooks, podcasts, truth-telling documentaries, and curriculum for all ages, Canon Plus wants to help your family laugh, sing, learn, and grow stronger together. And we're just getting started. We want the resources we produce to help you become a lighthouse in your own community, armed with courageous joy and faith that burns bright, right alongside millions of others who are just as determined to live in a way that honors God in these dark times. Your own food shouldn't attack you. Not at the table, and not gathered with your family on the couch. We are building a true alternative, and we can't do it alone. We need committed Christian families to build with us. So consider this your invitation. Pop some corn, grab the blankets, and help us build a streaming platform unlike any other. A platform that will strengthen Christians' mind, body, and soul. We saved you a spot on the couch. Canon Plus. Cancel the darkness. Invite light.
If you're a SASP listener who often makes it to the end of these videos and the end of our podcast, when I start talking, you'll know that I'm often bringing up Canon Plus. So I'm going to let you, in a couple seconds, watch a video that explains why Canon Plus is the premier Christian streaming service for entertainment, education, and theology. Give it a watch, and then please come join us on Canon Plus if you haven't already.
Does your streaming content make you a better wife and mother? A better husband and father? Or, when you sit down and pick up the remote, does the content you consume attack you?
You fat bastard.
Is it at war with everything you say you stand for? Does it make you stronger? Does it make your family stronger? How much darkness streams directly into your home every week? How much do you pay for the privilege of consuming whatever new dark thing Hollywood algorithms have assigned to you and to your family?
Just my two dads and me.
It doesn't have to be that way. Canon Plus is building a global platform with one simple goal: to create and deliver great content that will help Christian families grow stronger. Content to encourage, equip, challenge, and inspire. Yes, these times are bleak, but the darkness cannot win for long. Light is far more powerful. With thousands of audiobooks, podcasts, truth-telling documentaries, and curriculum for all ages, Canon Plus wants to help your family laugh, sing, learn, and grow stronger together. And we're just getting started. We want the resources we produce to help you become a lighthouse in your own community, armed with courageous joy and faith that burns bright, right alongside millions of others who are just as determined to live in a way that honors God in these dark times. Your own food shouldn't attack you. Not at the table, and not gathered with your family on the couch. We are building a true alternative, and we can't do it alone. We need committed Christian families to build with us. So consider this your invitation. Pop some corn, grab the blankets, and help us build a streaming platform unlike any other. A platform that will strengthen Christians' mind, body, and soul. We saved you a spot on the couch. Canon Plus. Cancel the darkness. Invite light.